You're listening to an interview with Azar Majidi, a member of the leadership of the Working Communist Party of Iran, Hekmatis. Today is Sunday, 22nd of March 2020. This interview is about the human cost of the devastating spread of coronavirus in the world. Welcome, Azar. Thank you for coming for this interview. The first question starts with a little comment. The extent of the spread and the numbers of death are really frightening and extremely alarming. Very, very sad situation. As everybody knows, coronavirus cases have passed 300,000 around the world. That's what's reported. There might be more, and more than 13,000 deaths around the world. Italy reported 800 deaths only on just one day, on Saturday, and many more in other countries like in Iran. People, everywhere know these statistics and justifiably are worried. Do you think that the measures that have been taken in different countries, especially in Iran, are working?
Well, it's, as you said, it's very sad, very worrying what's happening, both in terms of people's lives and misery they're going through, the insecurity of their lives, and if they're not dying of virus, they might die because of hunger or the situation that they, economic situation and social situation. In Iran, you mentioned, they are hiding all the numbers. Even WHO, the World Health Organization, has said that the numbers are 5 times more than what the Islamic regime announces, but I think is even more than 5 times. We keep seeing videos and hearing news from Iran that people are just dying, and they just bury the dead collectively without their families know where they are and how they are being buried. And this is really, really horrible. And as it comes to whether the governments are taking the proper measures, I have to just say a strong no, they are not. They have lied to people, they hid the facts, they only mentioned it after already the spread had gone, just taken all over the place. And even after that, the measures are so not limited. Some countries worse than the others. And when you talk about Iran, there's a regime, Islamic regime, which has no care, no responsibility towards the citizens. They're a bunch of thieves, murderers running the country. But in the Western world, where there is democracy and apparently some kind of um, accountability by the governments, see what measures they've taken. Look at Britain, Sweden, Holland, US. It's horrendous, and it's so worrying.
Yes, I mean, what amazes everybody, and is quite obvious to me, I've been thinking about this for a long time. The cruelty of capitalist system has always been obvious, which has, brought exploitation, misery, war, devastation to millions of people. We all know that. However, I think this epidemic has actually exposed its true nature even more. Do you not think so?
Exactly. Like, I just wrote an article in Farsi for our journal, Communist, the party's journal, and this is what I've said. Like, just from, I'm not talking about history long time ago. I'm talking about the past 20 years. Look at how many people died in the Middle East and North Africa due to wars. Million have died in Iraq, Afghanistan, Yemen, Syria, and Sudan, and just name it. Just name it. And uh, even on top of that, because of hunger and displacement that have ruined people's lives, many people lost their lives. We're talking really millions of people. And then once they decide to leave and escape the misery they live in, the hell they live in, see what happens to them in the Mediterranean Sea, in Libya, that they've taken these poor refugees as slaves and then selling them in slave markets, and in Mediterranean. But everybody here in Europe could say, Okay, that's somewhere else. They're poor. Their culture is backward. They're Muslim. They're this. They're that. But we're okay. But now they can't say that. Now they can't say that. When you compare the numbers of people who lost their lives to coronavirus, it's nothing compared to people who died because of wars, because of hunger, because of lack of security, because of dictatorships. But once it comes here and you look at that universality of human beings' destiny or existence at the hands of capitalism, then capitalism is really exposed, because here, they cannot have any of these excuses. And look at the way the governments are dealing with this situation. Herd immunities. I think Boris Johnson was the first one who's mentioned that. Angela Merkel has mentioned that. And now, still, they say in Sweden and Netherlands, that's the policy of the governments without saying it. That's what they're doing. And when you really go a bit further, what is herd immunity? Is the weak people should die and then the whole society will become immune, and that's the price the society has to pay. And when you look at it, when they talk about people's lives in terms of numbers and statistics and take all the humanity and flesh out of it, okay, everybody must say. But when you think of, okay, who are these numbers? Who are these weak are going to die in this herd immunity? Is my mother, my father, my grandma, my granddad, my uncle, my aunt, my beautiful neighbor? Then you see the inhumanity that's in this philosophy or ideology. And I call that social Darwinism. The survival of the fittest in evolution was something, but when you apply that to the society in a social manner, you see how fascism could come out of that. So you're talking about the situation now, the fear and the anxiety people go through, and the lives that are going to be lost, and then look at the society after coronavirus. If we allow that to happen, if we allow this ideology to stick, then we're looking at a real fascism coming to surface as mainstream, not only just extreme hardline fascist right wings that we have now. It would become in mainstream politics, and then we'll have fascism all over. And this is what is most worrying. We have to not only think about now under the coronavirus, we have to think of our society after coronavirus. What's going to happen to us?
Yeah, I mean, you talked about herd immunity. From what has been said, the people like Johnson who advocated, they believe it would be better if certain demographic groups, such as young people who are not so badly affected by the virus, are infected by it in order to build up immunity against it, which is total rubbish. It's just pick and choose, basically. And it kind of correlates with the current decision, which is horrific decision in certain hospitals, especially like in Italy, that they're actually prioritizing people who should have ventilators when you've got lack of ventilators, who should live and who should die. It's horrendous.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying is social Darwinism. And you're putting doctors in the position of moral judgment to make these decisions. They're giving directives now. Where was it? I think it was also in Britain. I read that they're going to give directives of how to deal with lives. So how you're going to save who, and who you're going to leave to die. And just imagine if this becomes the official policy of countries, of all these countries we live in. That's what I'm saying. What we're coming into, and choosing. Okay, I'm going to choose that person. This is old. This is young. I'm going to use this young person. This is disabled. This is healthy. I'm going to use the healthy. Okay, why not? This is an educated person with good job, and this is a simple laborer with only GCSE. Okay, who am I going to choose? The person who is highly educated, and just take that and go. Already health, I'm not even talking about luxury. I'm talking about the basic means of living are very much class-based. So already people who have means, who are affluent, who are rich, who are upper class, who are capitalists, they're going to get away with it. And then we're talking about working people, working class, deprived people in the society who are going to suffer even more loss of lives, loss of livelihood. In Britain, let's talk about it. Now they have taken some measures. They've taken back a few steps back from that herd immunity policy, but there is a big section of the labor class of the society who are either on temporary contracts, what they call here 0-hour contracts, and what they call bogus self-employed. These peoples have no means of livelihood, and the measure that they've taken does not definitely include the so-called so-called bogus self-employed, and not so much the temporary contracts and 0-hour contracts. They said, okay, they're going to pay up to 80% of people's salaries. So the rich again are going to gain, and the poor people are left to die, if not by corona, by hunger, losing their home, becoming homeless. And the unfairness, the inhumanity of the system is completely exposed, and it is up to me, you, and people like us, freedom-loving, humane people, to say, stop, enough is enough. We are going to expose this system. We cannot just let it go by itself. It does not happen just by itself. We have to not allow this narrative to stick. We have to fight this narrative and instead bring our own narratives. This is capitalism, pure and simple.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that one notices is that, as we know, capitalism is based on accumulation of capital and production of profit after profit, not based on needs of the society. And when I said that this coronavirus has actually exposed this nature of capitalism, one example of it is that the ventilators, the question of ventilators, which is paramount for the treatment of people who are suffering from the virus. There's a lack of and shortage of the ventilators in the world. And when you think about it, for example, in the UK, where you think that it's well equipped with medical provisions, it's really lacking ventilators. And suddenly, out of the blue, it is possible for a car manufacturing factory to stop manufacturing cars and suddenly produce ventilators. So one cannot help but question, why couldn't we do these things before the virus? Why couldn't the society be organized, or the whole system, the economic system, be based on need rather than profit? And that's what I mean. It's exposing the true nature of capitalism.
Exactly. It's private ridden. The drive behind this dynamism, or the structure of capitalism, is profit and competition over more profit and profit and profit. That's why the needs of people, the livelihood of people, the happiness of the people, the safety and health of the people is no place. And even if they have to think of these things, is also because workers need to have some kind of health and livelihood to be able to work and make profit, or partly because the societies, the class struggle has pushed the states, at least in the countries under democracy, to take some measures. But just think about the cuts that have been done after the death of social democracy, which was after the collapse of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War. The social democracy died. Socialism didn't die, but social democracy died. And what they call now neoliberalism, which is the death of social democracy, look at what happened. All these cuts that they've made, now we see the result. In France, for every 1,000 citizens, there are only 3 ICU units in beds in hospitals. In Britain, 2.1 for every 1,000. And in the US is something similar to Britain. And this means in situations like that, many people die because there are not enough ICU beds, they're not ventilators, or they're not even beds, just simply not beds in the hospital, or even cuts in training doctors and nurses, or not paying nurses or junior doctors enough in many places. Or the worst case is the US, which health is privatized and the amount of insurance, paying for insurance is so high. I just read a story of a 34-year-old woman in the US who apparently either got corona or was suspected of it, had gone to the emergency a couple of times, and finally they tested her. And I don't know what the result was. That did not really matter so much in that story, was that she got a bill for over $34,000 for 2 visits of emergency and a coronavirus test. 34,000 for just a young woman. Just think of that. And the US is going to be, what we're going to see in the US is going to be so hellish, because it does not even have some basic health care or social benefits than we can still see in Europe. Europe still is one step better than the US. And this is, and still the US Congress refused to pass a law for sick leave for all the workers. They did not pass it. And then the amount they're paying is so little. And even I heard still Trump is pushing to cut the food stamp for many people. Even in this situation, he still is doing that. And then see what's going to happen. Yes, capitalism is exposed, but we should not just let take its own process. We have to push it. We have to put it right in front of people's eyes and faces and say, this is capitalism. This is capitalism, and capitalism is only concerned with money and profit, amassing money and wealth for small sections of the population, and poverty and slavery for the big section of the population.
Right. The other side of what's happening is the sense of community and assistance that the general public have. Disregarding what the government say, this sense of cooperation and helping your humankind everywhere, in Britain, in Italy, and everywhere. You know, we've all heard about even the singers coming, and opera singers singing for people who are self-isolating to boost their morale, and even pop stars performing music sessions in their own homes and broadcasting it online, to people, for example, in Britain, who have produced a little poster, if you like, where people can download them, print them, write their names, and put it through the letterboxes of people saying that my name is blah, blah, blah. This is my number. If you need any help with your shopping, or if you just want somebody to talk to, this is my phone. You can phone me. I can bring shopping to you. Just leave it outside the door. You know, that kind of sense of community well-being, which is not directed by any government. It's kind of within the people to help their fellow citizens is going on. That's the other side of this tragedy.
Yes.
I mean, what I'm trying to say is that if you've got any more comments about this side of the story, it would be helpful.
Exactly. Coronavirus, to my opinion, like any other disasters, is double-edged, and we see how humanity is coming out of ordinary citizens. You mentioned these for UK, and let us talk a bit about Iran as well, which is under many people have died, and many people are have already infected by the virus, and there's no real help by the state. There's lack of all basic protection, like gloves or masks or what have you. And even what WHO sent to Iran as in shapes of help or some other European countries like France and Germany, they've all found their way into black market by the pastarans, or gone to Lebanon and Iraq, people say. There you see all these actually committees. Here people help their next door neighbor. There they've organized committees of people who are trying to disinfect the city, the streets, to things people use, to make masks, and try to help, and also help the needy, the elderly. I know some of the measures they do are not, cannot help as much, like masks have to be professionally made in order to be protective, or sometimes what they're doing is not professional enough and it cannot help as much. But the spirit behind it, the solidarity behind it, and this is really, really encouraging, and it's really uplifting when you, and they're just coming out like mushrooms everywhere in Iran. And I believe this is because of the 2 years of uprising in Iran that has changed the society, the spirit of the society, the morality, and the mental state, the collective mental state of the society. And this is really beautiful. But what it is, like here in UK, some of, or like for example, Ronaldo in Portugal has given his hospitals, put it for to have it as hospitals, or somebody here, Gary Neville in Britain, and things like that. If we do not put our narratives to that, if we do not talk about it in the terms of class war that exists, that's only charity. And what charity is, I don't believe in charity. I believe in goodwill. I believe in humanity in people, but I don't believe in charity. Charity is a means to sort of take away the edges of what this society, what capitalism does to us, and with religious side to it. I'm not saying people should not do that, don't get me wrong, but what I'm saying is we have to put it there. Charity is good, helping is good, but see people, what's happening. Open your eyes. This is capitalism, and the governments are actually the delegates or the representatives of that capitalist state, class, and bourgeoisie. And this is their ideology, this is their narrative, and this is ours. You might say, why am I keep saying that? Because I know if we don't do that and thinking, okay, people are helping, that's fine, and this is going to be okay. It's not going to be okay. It's not going to be okay. After this is gone, capitalism already is hitting a very, very severe crisis. They say it's even more severe than 2008. Just think about 2008. What happened? They saved all the banks and big companies, bailouts. And what happened then? People lost their jobs, the wages went down, a lot of cuts in welfare, a lot of cuts in social and health care and welfare that existed before in the society. Just Britain is a very good example. Since 2008 to 2020, what has happened? And all over the world this has happened. And this time is even going to be worse. This time is even going to be worse, what we're going to see after coronavirus, with this severe crisis that is facing. Like airlines in UK, they've said, okay, maybe 1 month, 2 months, they're going to stop working. They've just sent their employees home without wages. And they said if they demand wages, they're going to be dismissed. And actually, one of the members of the parliament told Bronson, Richard Branson, okay, sell your private island. But they're asking for bailout from the state. You're not paying your employees. Why do you want this bailout? Bailout for what? And I'm sure they're going to get it. I'm sure they're going to get it because this is capitalism. One really, really horrendous case that's been exposed: 2 Republican congressmen, they sold their stocks after the private meeting of the government, before the news of coronavirus hit the media. So they made a lot of profit out of people's misery. And they're just going to walk around and think they're very smart and clever, and nothing will happen to them.
Yeah. So what recommendations has the party, the Working Communist Party of Iran, Hekmatis, given to people in Iran?
They've they've asked people to extend their solidarity, extend their help, self-help to other people, but be aware of safety and security. Be aware of not just going down on the street to be infected or even infect other people. This is good to be helping, but you have to also do it wisely. The different press releases and different warnings have been given by Worker Communist Party of Iran Hekmatists regarding what to do and what not to do, and really encouraging this self-help movement, one side. The other is trying to force the government to free the political prisoners. We're talking about more than 200,000 political prisoners, and they said they freed. Just give them leave, not free completely, to 50,000. But not all of those 50,000 are freed. The government has given a guideline, but the local sheriff doesn't let them go. And a lot of political prisoners and also sort of criminals are in prisons, and their lives is really in danger. Few prisoners already have, the news has come out that they died of coronavirus in prisons. There were 2 riots in 2 prisons in Iran. One of them, after the Pasdarans killed 20-30 people, the rest escaped, but the other one, we still don't know what happens, whether anybody managed to escape or not. And we've really have been pushing for that, pushing for stop working in factories, because workers are still going to work. The CEOs and the managers, they're staying behind closed doors, but workers are exposed. And steel plant, 2-3 days ago, one worker was positive for corona, and the workers striked, I think, one day to have the company closed. Also in mines, we had 1 day strike. But what happens is a question of stop working, but give people a basic income so they can survive the hardships, they can survive economically. These are the things we are pushing. We're pushing. But as far as the Islamic Republic is concerned, we have seen no move to alleviate any of the hardships for the people, and it's just adding into it. So, but the political climates in Iran is so different, very different than, for example, Europe or other countries. There is a great deal of solidarity, a great deal of anger and hate for the state. People were in the process of uprising for the past 2 years, especially past few months. So this regime will, I'm sure, it's going to fall one day or another. Then this coronavirus is going to accelerate that day. But then we have to look worldwide what we're going to do. We have to fight back capitalism, and this should be our universal international slogan, exposing capitalism in the face of people's livelihood.
Thank you very much, Elsa. Thank you.
Thank you.